So we're doing something slightly different today. We're not focusing on one game and analysing it super deep. We are doing an Olympiad special. Over here in England, when the football's on, we have match of the day on a Saturday night where we can see the highlights of games. And I have looked through, I've trawled through Olympiad games, Dragon games. I've found loads of them, loads and loads and loads. And I've picked just some of the black wins in the Sicilian Dragon for us to have a
Fantastic.
look at now. What you have got to remember is no, unlike a lot of other people, we're not focusing on India and USA and Uzbekistan. And no, we are going all the way down and through in the middle and up and down and all around, essentially. So you might not improve your dragon abilities, but you'll certainly improve your geography during this session today. So what we're going to do, so we've got a few games, and we're going to start off from the Women's Olympiad, the game Guyana against Malta. Don't forget, some of these players might only be considered to be, good club players, but they are playing their heart out. They are playing for their countries, Anna.
There we
Right.
go. Yeah. And
Enough
as
waffling.
you know, and you've know it already, Malta is dear to my heart. I've been there, living there for 7 years. I made this little documentary with the Maltese women team and Milena Stanjo, who actually managed to gain the WFM title at the end of this tournament. So congrats for that.
Fantastic. I'm not going to lie, Anna. I had you in mind with both the first game and the last game in this
The
particular
last one
section.
too. Oh my God. Okay. I'm
But
looking forward to this.
you're gonna see why you might not be that happy. But
Oh no.
anyway, that's the way it goes. Now, so here we go. So we're cracking on with our Sicilian Dragon. Now, a few of these games, our viewers will notice start off with slightly funny move orders. They start off with accelerated dragon move orders. And as we know, the problem with those move orders is it does allow white to play the Maroxy binder. But actually, a lot of club players, lower level players, prefer not to do that. They've got their own systems that they like to play, as it happens here. And now black played the move d6. Whereas if black was consistent with their accelerated dragon, they would play knight f6 and they would dream of getting this pawn to d5 in one turn. But here black plays d6, and before you know it, look at that. We're just in a normal Sicilian dragon, like we could have played the normal move order. Now, as our viewers know only too well, probably this is kind of an old style classical dragon. The most common move here is for white to play knight to b3 to make sure that this pawn to d5 break is not viable for black.
Ooh.
Also, white could try queen d2, but no, in this game, white gets straight on with it with pawn up to f4, a very aggressive looking move. However, as we know, that can be punished by this sneaky move, queen b6. Now, normally, you would not want to put your queen on the same line as that bishop there on e3. But of course, currently this bishop on e3 is completely unprotected. And if, for example, white wanted a discovered attack against the queen, I didn't do that, that's for sure. Right, then queen takes b2 would suddenly be attacking the knight on c3. So we'd have a knight on c3 attack and a knight on f5 attack. That's just not possible at all. So queen b6, what's white going to do about that? Well, first thing to notice, of course, is black is threading a simple tactic just to win a pawn. Over to you, Anna.
Black is winning a pawn. Okay, so wow, that is interesting.
I see. You don't mind going to the Olympiad asking all these other questions. As soon as somebody asks you just one, just a little reminder, we're on the clock here today.
I mean, we can take b2 obviously, but that's not the tactic.
Okay, queen b2 might be, that you're absolutely right. Sorry, I should have explained. Taking that pawn might be a little bit poisoned in a few occasions, but we are threading simply to play knight takes e4 and unleash a dragon bishop to whip off that knight on d4 at the moment. So,
oh yeah, it's so simple. Gosh, my
we're simply
tactics.
threatening knight takes e4. Now, actually, what I particularly loved here, this is two games within one, because elsewhere in the Olympiad, there was a game, Monaco, in the men's Olympiad, Monaco versus Kazakhstan. And there, white played the normal. I'm going to show this game to you as well. White played the standard move, queen to d3, protecting the bishop, so that now the knight really is threatening to do discovered attack things. And then standard play is knight to g4, attacking the bishop on e3. Bishop takes and then unleashing here. And then we have a few swapsy-wopsies in the middle of the board would just be equal after bishop takes bishop. But we get that in a slightly different way here. Bishop takes, queen takes, and we get a little end game. And this is actually what we got. But I wanted to show you this, although we tend not to focus too much on endings here. What I really loved about this game, watch carefully. Black played f6 to kind of keep white away from playing e5, c3, and then we simply got on with a nice little neat minority attack effectively on the queen side of the board with this a5, b5. And even though all rook and pawn endgames are supposedly drawn, that doesn't go when there's two rooks on the board. And look at this. We had a very simple play of the minority attack. And black managed to utilize that open c file and infiltrate ultimately with the rooks. Look at this play here. Really smooth play. Look at this g5, the king's here, and now suddenly we're about to get some wonderful tactics with the black rooks. Look at this. Rook takes f5 suddenly. I love the way black played simple minority attack play, got the rooks in around the back. Love this game. This was really nice game of chess. And essentially we just ended up with a huge, absolutely huge kingside majority. And if you can get your rooks behind passed pawns where they belong, this is always going to be nice for black. And this is exactly the way the game went. Munchy, 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 and white resigned that game.
Beautiful.
I really loved that game, actually. So that was actually, there were a few games in the Olympiad, even just from that position alone. Now, in this game here, after white played knight a4, which I wouldn't say is the most ambitious move, because as you can see, the game continued here. Queen to a5, attacking the knight, and the knight came back to c3.
Oh, the draw's on the table.
So the draw is on the table, but no. Your Maltese friend did not want to go for a repetition, and I like the way she played this game. Look at this. This e5 move is always a move to look out for. Now, a lot of players might say, no, I don't want to block in my dragon bishop on g7. But look, we have a nice imbalanced position here because white, of course, has an isolated pawn on e4. Now, I would put to you here that this position is still a little bit in the balance because there's good things for black, namely the half-open c file, the open d file where the rooks are looking to activate, and there's the isolated pawn on e4 to play against. What does white have? White has a half-open f file potentially, and then there's this next move. I'm not really too impressed by this next move. Not super ambitious. White played the move bishop f3, which basically just bolsters that pawn on e4. But really, probably white should have played queen e1, bit like the kind of Grand Prix attack that you know only too well, Anna.
Oh, gosh.
Swizzling the queen out to
me.
a4. I would have preferred to sort of thing. We would have seen, no doubt, the black rook coming to c8, only too aware of the fact that if the white queen moves too quickly, we'd be lopping off that rook for an exchange sacrifice on c3 if it means picking up the e4 pawn and shattering the white pawn structure. So let's see how this game went. Bishop f3, rook a. Probably, I'm not entirely sure about this next little maneuver. I think I might have put the a rook onto c8 and the f rook onto d8. Feels like a logical way. In this game, the rook went here and then we swizzled that one back there. So I think we can kind of sweep that. We can just sweep that under the carpet, I think, for the time being. But, you know, queen f2, and look at this here. I think that there was a very nice move that was on the table here, which might have been the move queen to b4. That would awkwardly attack the b2 pawn. Black seemed to be kind of preoccupied with not losing their a7 pawn. So we have a6, rook fd1, and now look at this play, knight to g4. This is always a move to be looking out for in the Sicilian dragon. Knight to g4, because if you can win the bishop, particularly if you can win that dark square bishop, that is amazing. Bishop takes, attacking the rook, and let's see what happened now. Queen to b4. This is the move I was telling you about. That is a very awkward move to deal with, that pawn on b2, because how are we going to defend that? Bearing in mind b3 leaves the knight hanging. Of course it does. Rook b1 still leaves the knight hanging. Because a rook takes c3, but nobody would like to see this move played. Bishop c1, probably that's key. If you have to play a move like that, frankly, you know you're in big trouble. And look at this. And now, oh yes, it's Milena then. Yeah, is it? Oh no,
Yeah.
hang on, is it? Yeah.
Yes, it
Look at
is.
this pawn to f5, loving this play, activating the f8 rook along the f file. And look, within just a few moves, look at this. Rook takes f5, queen h4, and here there are a number of. Oh, do you know what? Remember my little rule that I come up with sometimes? Always look out
For
for
checks.
just in case there's a good one. Always look out for checks just in case there's a good one. How many checks would you say black has in this position? This is an easier question, by the way. How many checks would you say black has that don't lose something immediately? Well, actually, that's a lie.
Okay,
How
so
many checks are there that don't lose the queen immediately?
two.
Two. And they are both completely winning here. For example, we have the move rook to f1 check, forcing king takes f1, and then bishop e2 check. We'll win that queen on h4.
Oh,
But she went for an
see.
even better one. Queen b6 check. Oops a daisy. That is a long exposed diagonal. And of course, rook f1 checkmate is going to follow next. Game number one out of the way. Guyana against Malta. Right, okay. Here we go. Right, next up, we have got the Women's Olympiad again. This time round, we have Mozambique against Eritrea. Yeah,
Wow.
we have quite a few African nations involved in this kind of episode today.
Thank you
So,
very much for watching, all of the people from Africa. We hope you're
everybody here, you are
enjoying.
super duper welcome. Everyone is welcome in this place here. Now, here we go. And what have we got here? Well, a normal traditional dragon move order.
Oh,
Well, G6. Oh, no, hang on. That was a move order until knight C6 came out.
yeah.
You know probably why I would recommend white play in this position here, don't you? I would suggest pawn to C4, making the most of the fact that there is a Maroczy bind available. But white said, no, I don't want that sort of thing.
So
Let me get
this
G6.
Maroczy bind is something to really look out for because it will destroy all the fun in the dragon, right?
You know what that is? That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. That's a very good way of putting it. It's not as much fun playing against the Maroczy bind. Now, however, within a few moves' time, look at this. We get back 100% to the 9 bishop c4 Yugoslav attack variation, rook c8, bishop b3. Wow.
Wonderful.
This is it. And we know here, really, black should play knight to e5, and there could be the Saltis variation where the h4, h5 comes in. But here, black played a6.
Okay.
And you know my views on that sort of move really here. The problem is you have a choice. You can attack with pawns or you can attack with pieces. But the problem is because white has not yet moved their pawns around their king, a pawn advance, a pawn attack is going to be too slow because you're not going to get to challenge those pawns. It's not actually the pawns that are going to do the checkmating. It's the opening up of the
Yeah.
the files. And if, on the other hand, white was to go h4, h5, which we know they probably will, then they too are going to challenge. They're going to challenge that g6 pawn a bit quicker. So that's it. It's simply a matter of time. However, it's very true to you could argue that the bishop on b3 is going to be hunted down. So that might throw a little bit of confusion into the mix. But generally speaking, I'm not going to lie, I don't like that move. Pawn to g4. If I was white, I think I would have said, I don't need that g4 pawn. I'm going to get straight up with the h file is where I'm going to do it. I would have gone straight for h4. That was played there. And instead we see g4 and black played b5 and white play h4. Wow. So now we see, look at this, knight takes, bishop takes, and then a5. Wow.
Yeah, those two pawns seem to have some serious business going on.
So those two pawns, as you put it, have some serious business, although they could actually have got there a move quicker.
Yeah, that's true.
And in fact, we actually have reached an analogous, I need to say that properly, position, but with the pawn on g2, because we could have had the same thing with a knight takes d4 and a b5 and an a5. So we have a standard position, only white's got the extra move g4 thrown into the equation. And white, this is super duper shot. Look at this. White played h5. I'm going to try and open that h file. Yeah, but what are you going to do about your bishop down there on b3? And this is where we should have been a little bit more critical. My word, this is a super, 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 super sharp position. Now here, White simply played the move bishop to d5. But in fact, Super Sharp is actually taking this bishop here. Now, you straight away would say, Chris, whoa, you told me you can't give away that bishop for the knight. But the problem is, if we simply take here, look at this, all of a sudden the move, queen h6, as we can see, is going to be a little bit of a problem. Because suddenly there is checkmate on h7, and if the rook went to e8 to offer an escape square, it's still queen takes h7, king f8, queen takes f7 check.
Unavoidable.
So that is seriously a problem. Yeah, so it's a bit grovelly. Here, black could just about save themselves from being checkmated by giving up the bishop to g5 check and going here. But still, after in this position here, I would suggest that white is... Well, I would suggest white's currently a pawn up, but the f3 pawn, I prefer white here. I think that's clear, basically, because the white king position feels a bit safe. So, bishop takes f6 would have been absolutely critical in this position. In fact, the game should have gone bishop takes, and after h takes, black playing the move e6, which fulfills a number of functions. Basically, what does it do? It covers the d5 square. It bolsters that long diagonal, so the bishop on b3, which no longer has d5 available, is also not pinning the f7 pawn. And most sneaky of all is if white tries queen h6 now, then bishop g5 check will win that queen. So we could have e6, a complete mess. This position would be a complete mess.
Yeah.
So that's what should have happened. But in fact, in this game, white tried to look after their bishop. It doesn't look so great when it gets stuck behind enemy lines like that. And they tried to dig it out like this. But let's see what happened. Bishop takes, but the problem is rook takes b7. And white was maybe throwing all their cookies into the jar. I think I've just made that phrase up.
That's a beautiful phrase.
Cookies don't normally go thrown into the jar, they come out. Anyway, the fact of life is that now everything's protected here. Eggs into one basket, that's another phrase. And now everything's protected. Yeah, so here, actually, as it happens, black emerged an extra piece to the good. And so victory for East Africa, maybe, I'm not, or North Africa, one Africa. Anyway, so therefore, do look it up. That's what I'm basically going to say. Now, next up, we are loading the next game. We're now following South Korea against Venezuela. Oh, South American. Now, here we go. Now, look at this, everybody. This is, I can tell you, there were 2 dragon games featured that I saw. One of them was 146 moves. Come on. No way I'm going to show you that game. No, I'm going to show you one which is 140 moves. This is the one. Now, don't worry. This is edited highlights. Now, let's check out. Again, a funny move order. Why do we keep getting these funny move orders? But still, in this position here, we are now back to a 9 bishop c4 castles variation. Rook c8 would be the standard move here. Black could also play queen a5 and rook fc8, which is my old system that I used to play. But no, we have a5, looking to hunt down that bishop. But the question is, after white plays a4, who has really gained? Because on one hand, is this pawn weak? Well, it seems to be adequately protected. There's a hole on b4, but there's a hole on b5. Anyway, let's keep going. Rook c8. Black is looking to park their knight potentially on c4, and white played queen e2. I'm not sure about this move here. And look at this. Rook takes c3, b takes c3. So we have an exchange sacrifice here. Wow. Now, let me just show you some highlights of this position, because I'm not going to go every game of every move. But I have to say, I absolutely love this game. So jumping through a few moves. Wow, what's going on here? The white king has tried to leg it over to the king side, but the black queen has found it out and won the h2 pawn. But meanwhile, we've given up a pawn elsewhere in the center. So let's jump down. And now we get, whoa, let me give you a few seconds to take this. Talk about further imbalances. We've got a queen here for 3 minor pieces. Now, I would have to say here that surely white probably, well, hang on, I've just said surely and probably, maybe. I'm going to cover all bases. Maybe white should be pushing to win this game here. But anyway, the black knights have got a little bit of a blockade here of that d6 pawn. But if we ruffle on another 12 moves or so, it's all change for the knights. We've got one of the knights still there. It might be the same knight. It might be a different knight. But there it goes. And this is how we go. But now, suddenly, Oh my word. Look at this. We keep going here. And suddenly black has managed to do some switcheroo. In fact, time for a change. Let's go back here. Black played the move G5, which meant they were going to trade that pawn for that pawn there. And within a few moves' time, we're talking about another 20 or so, king came up to H5. So look at this. The minor pieces are on the attack, but it's difficult. Getting those pieces moving together is not easy, and you have to avoid forks, pins, skewers, all those sort of things. Now,
so much stress for both sides.
it's so much stress for both. Absolutely, that's the way I put it. Now, we go on here, and we've swapped a pawn for a pawn, and black now has a passed H pawn. Wow, but they're king. Look at that. It's super duper exposed. So it's ended up down there. Oh my word. Is it going to end up back up the front? Let's just see. Let's go through a few checks. Checkety check, McCheck. Checkety check. The king dodging the checks as best as it possibly can. Is it going to get out of those checks? You're absolutely right. It's going to get out of those checks eventually. Now, here we go now. Oh my word, there's more checks. Right. Now, here we go. Look at this. Now, in this position, I feel black missed a golden opportunity to play the move knight F5. That would have secured the chance for a check and that pawn to make it to the end of the board. But instead, he was obsessed with wanting to get his king super duper hit further down. The problem was, look at this check and pinning, and now the pawn was forced to go to the 7th rank. But the problem was now the king's there, and when the king was in the corner of the board, oh my word, there's no squares for the king to go to, and we know what that means. Yes, stalemate is a possibility. Is that really what's going to happen? Here, take my knight. No thanks, not with knight F2 coming, no way. But queen D2, oh, back there again. Queen D4 check. What? I can take that. No, you can't, because if you take it, it's stalemate.
Oh gosh.
How about here, king F3? Take my queen now. Oh, my word. I can't take that one with the king or the bishop. Still stalemate. Back here. Look, I'm getting a bit bored with this. Can you take my queen, please? King D2 and queen here, check. And unfortunately, in this position here, there was no choice. If the king had gone to F, well, I think I would have liked to have seen one more attempt. I would have liked to see maybe king F6, queen takes knight, check. And now you can dodge the checks if you want, or you can take my queen. But I think you might start pushing it a little bit if you don't take the queen now. And either way, that would have been stalemate. What an entertaining game that was. Who says dragons are just hack attack, game over in the opening? No, we get end games as well. 146 moves end games in some cases.
Oh, fantastic. Off to the next game.
And we have got, again in the women's Olympiad, Norway against Mexico.
Ooh,
ready for this one?
2,200 rating ahead.
Oh, we're moving up the charts. We're moving up the charts. We're slowly progressing in the rating department. Now, this game I also really, really loved. And what's more is we get a perfect move order this time round for the Yugoslav attack.
Oh, nice.
But now, so we had the right move order, but now white plays knight b3.
Yeah, then it stopped.
Knight b3, stopping all this queen. So we have the same thing. The knight could have gone to b3 after casting or before casting, but in either way, they did it as opposed to playing f4 that we saw in the very first game, which enabled the queen b6.
Quick question. Does this have any advantage for black that the move order is a little different, that white is using knight to b3 a bit earlier? Or
no, I think not. The only thing I would say, absolutely not. I don't think there's any advantage.
Okay.
The only difference is here. There's no difference. White could choose to play slightly different. They could play what they could do is they could go f4 and then g4 if they were super aggressive here. It doesn't have a good reputation, this system for white.
See.
It's not like because although it looks offensive over there on the king side, it's nothing like the old h4, h5 type opening up the h type attacks. So it gives an offer option, but quite frankly, no, this is after this move here. After white's 9th move. This is where the dust settles. And in particular, black's played all the normal dragony moves, right? And normally the big question next is going to be what we're going to do with this bishop on c8. Yeah? So I like the move bishop to e6. It's the most common move in this particular position. Bishop e6 and white plays f4. And here black played a move which This game is just a nice game, to be honest with you. We're not going to play over the whole game as it happens, but bishop e6. But this is where essentially you ask yourself, is this pawn now threatening to come down to f5? What are we going to do about that? Now, in the old days, in my junior dragon days, I would play knight a5, the idea being then to give my bishop access to the c4 square. So that ultimately you dream of ending it with a knight on c4. A key variation that I later learned, which is very nice, is rook c8. And if white continues like this now and tries to squash black on the king side, then the key point is now we open up the chance to do a wonderful exchange sacrifice. That, as I mentioned before, if you can win that e4 point and shatter the white queen side, that is well worth giving up the exchange for, particularly with more pieces on the board. Definitely a good exchange sack. The only time it's not good if you literally get down to a flat knight against a rook ending. A rook is going to be much better than a knight. But if there's other pieces on the board, it's nearly always going to be a good thing to do. However, black played a different move entirely. b5. And you're going to say, what?
Excuse me?
What? Excuse me? I didn't even realize that move was possible. So the question is, how can we justify this move, pawn to b5? Well, the first point is that pawn is not unprised. Well, it's unprised to two white pieces, but if the knight takes it, then simply we're trading the b pawn for the e pawn, which is a massive gain for black. So that's clear. The question is, can white take it with their light squared bishop? Well, where are they now vulnerable after they've taken this pawn? And what move was it I told you should always try to look out for? And the answer is...
That's a check.
Yeah, there's no check
There's
here.
no check.
But so there is.
What were you saying?
Move here, knight to g4. Keep an eye out for that move. Always look out for checks is a general advice in any type of position. That's all the way through the game, I would say, just in case a good one comes along.
But that's sneaky indeed.
Specifically in the dragon knight to g4, now available because, of course, there's no longer a bishop on e2. That is actually quite an awkward move. And I was looking at this myself, quite cute as well, as if white, really, if you can get that dark square bishop, you're laughing. And if white defended it, a very fun move now then would even be knight to b4, I think, which of course, yeah. So, but the main thing is just winning that dark square bishop in itself. It would be a nice aim. In any instance, white decided, no, I'm not having any of that. Thanks very much. I'm staying away from those. I'm playing bishop f3. This is what happened. Rook c8 was played. Let's keep going, and we have king h1, and only now the king is off the long diagonal do we see a6, and the bishop dropped back to g1. But look, I love the way that black played this game. The problem with the bishop being on f3 in some lines is, of course, it's obstructing the f-file action. It might be supporting a knight d5 break, but there's going to be a pawn on b2, which is hanging. That knight d4 playable because that bishop on g1 is protecting it. But the bishop to c4, this is what I love. Rook to e1. And I just love this game. Knight takes, bishop takes, and pawn up to e5, which secures that square on e5 for the knight. So this is one of the reasons for playing the move e5, particularly when there's a white pawn on f4. So long as that pawn on f4 can't just roll down to f5 and kind of grip you with g4, g5, and f6 and all that to follow. The main point is when e5 is played, of course, it is actually attacking a white piece, so there's no chance to play pawn to f5. So now we get a wonderful square on that knight. So I really like black's position here. Pawn to a3 prevented the b pawn from rolling down the ball, but a5 again reinforces that. And this is just such a smooth game of chess. And in particular here, black played quite a cheeky little move, queen to g5. Well, just activating the queen. I don't mind that move at all. But I have to say in this position here, b3 would have been seriously bad news because now we're looking to buy the d3 square for the knight on e5, which would, of course, be a simple fall. But also the tactics involved in it is if c takes b3, suddenly, this is what I like. Look at this. Everything is just about protecting everything here. Let's talk about that white queen. What is it protecting? Well, it's protecting the rook on c1. Is that really relevant? Well, look, we can do now knight takes f3, g takes f3, and bishop takes e2. And the problem is the queen needs to protect the bishop on d4 and the rook on c1.
Oh my gosh, that is hard to calculate.
That is hard, but that's why these players are playing for Mexico and Norway and such like.
Indeed,
So,
indeed.
so that's what we have there. So Bishop, and I
Beautiful.
would have loved that. B3, a lovely game. Again, a very nice game, a demonstration how to play against
Uh-huh.
the classical variation. So I really like that game. And now we're moving on
So that
to
was
another.
White gave up here, or
Yeah,
continued
no,
and
the game went on,
continued. Okay.
but after Queen to G5, basically in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
position here, Black was we can't, don't forget this is match of the day.
Of course, of course.
B3, I think would have been a clear advantage. After Queen G5, I think Black's definitely comfortably better, but B3 would have been even
Beautiful.
better. So low next game. Let's move on. Okay, and what are we doing here? And we have got now we are stepping things up. We are moving on to our fifth penultimate game of the episode. And this time we're talking about Angola against Colombia, a 24.85 FIDE rated player. Let's get cracking. So what have we got here? We have the normal Sicilian dragon move order, as you know, bishop e3, knight c6. Now, we know something might be brewing when we see that move, knight c6 being prioritized over bishop g7. And you would be absolutely right, because we have got h5 and we have got the super fashionable Hungarian variation.
How
We've covered that
fitting.
quite a lot.
How fitting.
Yeah, so exactly. So the idea, and what's the idea of this h5 idea? Well, we know that typically if white just plays the move queen d2, then black is planning on swapping off in the middle of the board and then whizzing their bishop all the way over there to h6. So white has been trying to combat that by saying, no, I'm not going to put my queen on d2 yet. I'm going to just find another useful move instead. And of course, bishop c4 is a very useful move. Now, the bishop did commit itself to g7. I mean, I think there's other moves. Black could play bishop d7 as well, bishop g7. And now the queen went to d2. So, of course, if black wants to do it now, I mean,
It's like a
of
lost
course.
tempo, but it's possible.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly right. Losing but generally losing a tempo is, not only is it dealing with the situation on the board, you have to lose face as well and hope that nobody noticed that you actually did it. So, yeah. So instead, though, we've kind of got a Yugoslav attack bishop c4 variation with black fidgeting around the edges. So that's essentially what we've got here, to be fair. But what I particularly like is after bishop b3, black plays rook b8. Now, what is the idea of rook b8? Well, what I like about this game is we're kind of combining two different systems. On the king side, we have the h5 move, which is reminiscent of a kind of Soltis variation, which stops white from razzing, attacking down the h file. Of course, the key thing is the king is still in the middle of the board. But rook b8 suggests that black is going to play b5 and knight c4 to try and prise open that b file to get a nice little attack. So white thinks, well, what am I going to do? I can't just sit here like a lemon. I mean, he could sit around playing king b1. He could twiddle his thumbs for a little bit. But he's thinking, how am I actually going to attack that black situation here? I mean, f4 and e5 might be an idea, but then we know you give away the g4 square for the knight. That's not great. So white played h3, simply planning to go g4. Fair enough. b5,
there
g4.
It is.
Now, fair enough. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong here with just continuing with the main plan of playing knight to c4. For example, though, I imagine we might see something like this, and then possibly black was worried about e5, but I don't really think so. The idea is that knight c6 as a tactic simply doesn't work here because, of course, this rook is protecting the queen on d8. It would be a possibility if the white queen wasn't on the d file, of course, but even if we have something like g5, knight h5, yeah, white's maybe some action going on over here, but it's nothing special, to be honest. But in any instance, black decided, you know what, instead of that, I'm going to play queen c8. So he's basically coming off of the d file, so there's not to take the sting out of any e4 to e5 thrusts in the future. Let's keep going with this game. Knight to d5, knight takes d5, here we go. Again, I think knight c4 would also be very playable for black here. Knight takes d5, e takes d5. So this is the whole point. Why I wanted to take with the e pawn. So now they're saying, well, okay, if you're going to leave your king in the center of the board, at least I'm going to have the e file to try to attack with my rooks. But the problem is, potentially this pawn could be a little bit weak, as we see. So knight c4, we know white is going to want to preserve the dark square bishop at all costs. But already I think this position is very nice for black. I think we've got here a half open b file. We've got two bishops, of course, which are very nice.
And they
we're
look
simply
strong,
threatening, we're simply threatening queen b7 to attack b2 and the d5 pawn simultaneously, of course. And of course, whilst white has played g4, we're not even castled yet, so that's no big deal for the king. So
Another typical thing in this Hungarian variation, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. So now you've, oh wow, Arne, I am so impressed. You have been paying super duper attention. Now, here's what we go: c3 happen. And now the queen could come over to a6. Let's look at this game here. And now we have queen a5. So now what does that do? That attacks the d5 pawn and it keeps the pressure on c3. So, for example, it's not now possible. Well, how is white going to defend that pawn on d5? Well, first and foremost, they can't play knight c2 here because simply bishop takes c3 because the b pawn is pinned. That's definitely... They could go knight e2, but then black would just ramp the pressure up on that d5 pawn, I think, with rook. And, of course, that facilitates the potential doubling as well of rooks on the b file. So instead, white simply played rook he1. Looking to get some pressure, saying you can have that d5 pawn if you want, and black says, oh, thanks very much, I will then, if that's the case. So queen takes d5, and now we're going to accelerate because we're still on the highlights package at the moment. Queen e2, a few moves happen, and now black says, now's the time. I'm going to castle. And why am I going to castle now? Because I would like, please, to have my other rook on the b file. Now you could say, well, hang on, surely g takes h5 becomes a possibility, but that's only going to offer up the chances for the bishop to get access to f5 square. So that's super duper risky. White prophylactically plays king a1, but now of course a2 is going to be an issue because we now start swizzling the pieces around here. Queen c1, rook b8, and all of the black's pieces they're all on the case really here.
Devastating.
Rook d2. Lovely. And look at this cheeky move here, h4. Not necessary, actually, but just sealing up the h4 and saying, by the way, my king is enjoying himself over there, G. Just watching the action like with a remote control over there. So here we go. f4. e5 dislodges that knight. Rook a6, threatening mate on a2. a3. I think we know where this is going. And if I accelerate here, look at what happens in the next few moves. Rook takes b2. I should have held that back, but I didn't. Rook takes b2. What a lovely looking move. If the king takes on b2, it's going to be checkmate. Yeah. It's going to be checkmate. And you can say, you sure that king can't run away somehow? Let's just check it out. King takes b2, check. Well, if king c2, then queen b3 is an obvious mate. But how is this mate? And you said, oh, yeah, I forgot there's a bishop that can come into play over there. So that would be checkmate for sure. Wow, we are doing a very, very good job. Rook takes b2, then was absolutely forced. Of course, if he takes with the queen, bishop takes c3. That is, wow. That is pin and skewer city, isn't it? That bishop takes c3. That's the queen through to the king and the rook through to the rook. I mean, I don't even think that's got a name.
That's
like drafts, probably. Is that like drafts or something like that?
The Uber pin.
So yeah, so we'll so we're not going. I won't put that on the board just yet. We had rook takes b2, queen bishop takes, and now the bishop's still doing a fair few jobs here. Now the bishop took on d6. Now I think black could have done better, but then if black had played the correct moves, he would have surely have gone on to win. But we would never have got the finish, which we did do, unleashing a discovered attack against the bishop, which moved
bishop
here.
e4.
And look at
yeah, okay.
Right, black to play and win.
Is it so simple? Queen takes a3 check.
It is. I just wanted to make you feel
Beautiful.
good about yourself.
Thank you.
So
I
we
do.
have
I
queen
do.
takes
It
a3
worked.
check. And that is going to be check. Well, it's kind of because that is the 5 of the games so far. So we know that they are all we know they're all Olympiad related
Yeah.
games. These games
But
here.
this one is a beauty, absolutely.
What a lovely finish to this particular game. And we've got one more game then that we're about to look at, which wasn't quite played so much at the Olympiad, but did actually feature our intrepid Olympiad reporter, basically, in a Blitz game straight after the event, armed with all the latest resources of the dragon, techniques. And I have to say, I wouldn't have put this in before yesterday, and maybe it's not a good idea. But the fact is, I've done it now, so I shall finish. Now, let's have a look at this game. This was literally I'll leave you to say who it was. But the fact of life is that this is another dragon game with some really, really nice themes to it. Look at this. So here we are back to mainline theory. 9 castles. This is brilliant. And we know D5. We've been over different options. We know this is the key line. And we know, E takes D5 is possible. King B1's possible. Queen E1's possible. But this has been quite a fashionable line. Knight takes C6, B takes C6. But to be fair, when we get this position, we usually focus on the move bishop H6. But here, somebody playing with the black pieces, I'm not sure, right, played the move. White played E5.
Yeah.
Right, attacking that knight on f6. I do have to remind everyone this was a really super duper Blitz game, but it's got a couple of themes in it which I really thought were worth highlighting. The knight, of course, attack drops back to d7, absolutely perfect square to go back to. And we're definitely attacking that pawn on e5. So white played f4. So now, what's going on here? So for me, right, there's basically 2 modes of play. And actually, black demonstrated during the game very well where the action should come from. One obvious way to play is down the b file. That is absolutely one way to play. And the other thing is to open up the dragon bishop by playing the move pawn to f6. However, we do have to beware simple tactics. For example, f6 now would allow white the chance to play knight takes d5.
Goodness.
Because we might have a little problem with the king and a little fork with the king and the rook on a8. So in this position here, actually, probably I would suggest the most common 2 moves for black to play. One of them is simply to go e6.
E6, yeah.
Simply with the idea of playing f6 next go, come what may. Right?
Yeah.
To blast open that bishop. And e6 simply, it's not like you're playing a French defense and you're fianchetting your bishop against a pawn on e5 and making it look silly. You've literally got f6 coming your way that will blast open that diagonal.
Yeah,
and
e6 was
simply
crucial.
bolsters d5. The other move I would actually try, I would quite attracted to, would be queen a5 immediately, which also offers that little protection on
Thought about it.
So that's kind of flexible. You played rook b8, which does leave the a7 pawn hanging, but to be honest, we're not bothered about that pawn. That's nonsense about the taking that pawn. So you're about that to the white now played h4, looking to play h4 to h5 to blast open this. And now again, I'm thinking maybe queen a5 in this position. Black played f6 here. Right, looking to open up that now. Of course, does that mean knight takes d5 would be a good move? Now knight takes d5 now, of course, would not have the effect of winning the rook on 8. It would be quite complicated, though, because the whole idea is after this and check, if we were just simply to move our king, then pawn to e6 now would win that knight on d7. However, pawn to e6 to block the check. So pawn to e6 to block the check, and now king h8 would really throw the cat amongst the pigeons. Black has given up quite a few pawns, 3 pawns. But look, you're not losing your piece. So that would be completely murky. I think this position here, absolutely for sure. So instead, white. Knight takes d5 may be the best move. E takes f6 was played. Now, I have to say I'm slightly surprised with the recapturing here. Black has 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways to take on f6. And I think it's pretty clear to me here, I would have taken back with the knight.
I think everybody would have.
Oh, well, not maybe everybody, because in this game, black took back with the bishop. Yeah. Now, but of course,
dear.
after you take back with knight e4 is threatened and b2 is hanging.
Yeah.
So that is quite a big threat. And of course,
that's
the
a
knight
good
does
threat.
offer some defensive resources as well. So knight takes, I think, would have to be best. Bishop took. White played queen h5. But look at this. We continue with the attack over here. Do we get this swapped off? And white played bishop b4. Now, oh my word. Still, you could argue that black has played 1 or 2 inaccuracies. But still, black is really on the offensive here. Pawn to c5 was played here, which I think has to go down as a little bit of a mistake.
No,
but look what could have
queen
happened.
b4 would have been a bit nicer.
Yeah, queen to b4 threatening mate. And after b3, look at this, knight c5.
Yeah.
And we've now got some mega threats. With like queen a3, the sacrifice on b3 is going to be, wow, that's going to be pretty big, particularly when you bear in mind the bishop's coming to f5, pinning the c2 pawn. So that would be a massive threat. So I really like that. And of course, white, with this pawn on f4, white isn't actually close just yet to threatening mate themselves on h7 or h8, of course. Pawn to c5 went. Now, the problem with that move here, I think white could have just taken that pawn on d5 with the knight, because at first glimpse, you'd say, well, hang on, I'm going to take on a2. And actually, this looks pretty dangerous down here. But at the very least, of course, white could simply come to d5, check and swap off queens, which is not what black's looking for, having sacrificed a pawn.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be a weak pawn on c5 as well. So that will be favorable for white. But instead, white played queen d3, eyeing up this pawn on g6. But this is, of course, a terrible move, because then bishop f5 comes with gain of tempo. Queen e3, and now d4 did, of course, fork the knight and the queen. But I would love once more to have seen queen b4 deployed in this particular position. And what would have been nice here would have been this, if king b1. Oh, rook takes.
So nice.
Check. King here, check. The knight can't block because the queen hangs on e3 and rook b8. And particularly here, cute. Look at this for cuteness here. Knight e4, as if to say, sorry, Mr. Knight on c3. Not only can you not move, and that's even better than just taking the bishop on b5. And, it's like toying. It's like cat and mouse. No offense to anyone that's got mice as pets. And not many people do. Now, knight to e4, brilliant. Queen to e3 happened. And your game, it went a little, let's just see, d4.
Too quick. That was just
Queen
too quick.
Well, let's remind ourselves this was a blitz game, to be fair. Queen here, b3, and again. Oh, wow. d3. Where did this move come from?
Well,
That's
I'll
what
tell
I'd
you,
like to know.
I was too scared of bishop c4. And this was where I thought a bit too long. But there's a beautiful counter, which I should have thought of. I would have liked...
so queen a3 check.
Queen f3 is the best. But I think
if the king tries to run, you're winning that knight with check, of course,
this
time round.
And that's game over for white, almost. It is game over for white. But I even thought about rook f7, which was quite cute.
Yeah.
And then I could have just taken the bishop on c4.
Oh, very cute. Rook f7. Let's pop that on the board.
Yeah. So
Bishop
now I just take.
Oh, look, can I just say, okay, you lost this game, but this has surely enriched your life, this sort of position, surely.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yes.
I mean, look at this. Look at that bishop. Look at that rook. Look at that queen. You're not even getting anywhere near getting checkmated here. This is like brilliant stuff, I have to say. So, I probably, okay, just quickly, let's sweep these last few moves under the carpet. And the problem was, in fact, Even here, look at this. Everyone's saying, well, hang on, slow down. What happened there? Actually, after Queen A5 check, I think B4 would have been a bit of a problem for
Yeah,
you. Queen is now under attack. And of course, the white knight's threatening to take on F6. Let's just point out, by the way, the whole idea is you can't take this because that would be checkmate on H7. So B4 would have been a problem, but you are still very much in the game here. Queen A2 check, King E1, and this is where I'm afraid Rook to E8, though it looks like a lovely pin, unfortunately, is going to lose to knight takes F6. But even here, knight to H5,
and all is good.
blocking the H file would have been murky. Let's say murky. I'm not going to say it's good for sure because Rook takes H5. Your king's a bit exposed. Don't know if you're losing. Don't know if it's a draw. Don't know if it's a perpetual, whatever. But it would have kept the game alive. But unfortunately, Rook E8, and now, yep, that's bad news, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah.
But I thought generally, can I just say,
Please.
For me, you've taken on board loads of the ideas there. That was a really nice game. It would have been nice if you'd have won that game.
Yeah.
You're playing against a good player in a Blitz game of chess, and you basically had the right direction, the right ideas. If that had been a slow play game, I'm sure you'd have won that game comfortably.
I am afraid not. But still...
Okay, admittedly, he wouldn't have played Queen D3 was a terrible move. But you'd have, yeah, whatever. If you'd have had loads of time and he was still playing with 3 minutes, you'd have won that game comfortably.
Maybe. Who knows?
Great stuff.
Oh, that was so much fun. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Chris, for gathering all those nice games. Yeah, we will see each other very soon. I would say next month for the monthly dragon. Until then.